My brother's voice was a frantic buzz in my ear, thin and tinny through the phone speaker. "Chloe, what did you do? The website is gone. It's just gone. Viridian is here, Dad is stalling, and the presentation link just leads to an error page. You have to fix this. Now." I was sitting on my balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, a cup of coffee warming my hands. I took a slow sip before I answered, my own voice calm, level, a placid lake next to his raging river. "I know, Kevin. I'm the one who took it down." The silence on the other end of the line was more satisfying than any screaming match could ever be. It was the sound of a carefully constructed world, built on my labor and their lies, shattering into a million pieces. 3 months ago, this all started with a very different phone call. A tearful, desperate one from my mother. The family business, the Reading Nook, the dusty, beloved, and chronically unprofitable bookstore my grandfather had started 70 years ago, was on the brink of collapse. "The developers are circling, Chloe," she'd sobbed. "The town is changing. We can't compete with the big chains anymore. Your father is a wreck. He thinks he's going to lose his father's legacy." She'd paused, the sound of her taking a shaky breath. "You're our only hope. That computer magic you do. Could you build us a website? An online store? To help us reach people beyond this town? To save us?" They laid it on thick, a 3-course meal of guilt, nostalgia, and obligation. They knew I couldn't say no. Not to saving the Reading Nook. It was more than a store. It was the backdrop of my entire childhood. I learned to read in its dusty aisles, spent summers curled in the worn leather armchair in the history section, and got my first job, alphabetizing paperbacks for $1 an hour. It was where I'd fallen in love with stories, the idea that you could build entire worlds from nothing but words and imagination. That love for building worlds had eventually led me to my career in web design and development. I wasn't just doing computer magic. I was a senior developer at a successful tech firm, managing a team and building complex, beautiful digital experiences for major clients. The kind of work they would have had to pay a high-end agency upwards of $50,000 for. I told them yes, of course. I'd do it for free. I saw it as a gift, a way to pour my modern skills back into the foundation of my past, to repay the place that had given me so much. I told them I'd clear my nights and weekends for the next 3 months. I'd build them a digital lifeboat. I just didn't realize they were already planning to use it to sail away, leaving me and the town's memory to drown. The project became my entire life. My own apartment began to feel less like a home and more like a satellite office for the Reading Nook. My living room was a chaotic collage of sticky notes with code snippets, wireframe sketches taped to the walls, and books on user experience design fanned out across the coffee table. Every night after my real job, I'd dive into this second, unpaid one. I wasn't just slapping together some generic template. I wanted to capture the soul of the store. I spent hours digitally restoring the old, hand-painted logo my grandmother had designed. I created a custom font based on the typeface of my grandfather's old Olivetti typewriter. I designed a virtual tour feature that allowed users to walk through the aisles, clicking on shelves to browse, replicating the magic of discovery that made the physical store so special. I drove out to their house every weekend, setting up my laptop on the old oak table in their kitchen, the air thick with the smell of my mom's pot roast and my dad's quiet anxiety. At first, they were the picture of gratitude. My mom would bring me tea and tell me I was a lifesaver. My dad would hover behind me, murmuring things like, "Incredible. Just incredible what you can do, honey." But soon the dynamic started to shift. It began with the arrival of my brother, Kevin. Kevin was the family's golden boy. He'd coasted through life on a wave of charm, and my parents' unwavering belief in his potential, a potential that had yet to manifest into anything concrete. He worked a vague sales job and spoke about synergy and disruption, but mostly, he was just good at looking the part. He'd saunter in on a Saturday afternoon, dressed in a crisp polo shirt, and peer over my shoulder. He'd say, pointing a manicured finger at my screen. "Is that the final color palette? It feels a little muted, a bit dated." I'd patiently explain my rationale, the design theory behind using warm, earthy tones to evoke the feeling of worn paper and leather bindings. He'd just smirk. "Yeah, I get it. But you gotta have more pop, Chloe. More sizzle." I was just talking to a guy in marketing, and he said blue is the color of trust. "You should be using more blue." My parents, who knew nothing about design, would nod along eagerly. "Kevin has a good eye for these things," my mom would say. "Maybe listen to your brother, dear." The suggestions became critiques, then demands. Kevin wanted a scrolling banner of bestsellers on the homepage, a feature I argued against because it cluttered the clean, minimalist design. He wanted flashing sale icons, which I felt cheapened the brand. Each time, I'd try to explain the user experience principles, the importance of brand identity, the years of expertise that informed my decisions. And each time, I'd be shut down. "It just seems like common sense, Chloe," my dad would say, his voice tinged with disappointment, as if my refusal to add a blinking GIF was a personal failing. The worst was when Kevin started taking credit. He'd bring his friends over, and I'd hear him in the other room, his voice booming. "Yeah, my sister is handling the coding. But I'm really the creative director on this project. The whole concept was my idea." I'd sit there, lines of PHP blurring in front of my eyes, my jaw tight with a rage I couldn't express. I was a ghostwriter for my own work, building a monument that my brother was already busy engraving his name on. I was pouring my heart and soul into saving their legacy, and they were letting him treat my expertise like a rough draft he was entitled to edit. The breaking point didn't come with a bang. It was a whisper. It was the quiet hum of a printer in the middle of the night. I had been at their house for 3 straight days, fueled by coffee and a looming self-imposed deadline, putting the final touches on the inventory database. It was almost 2 a.m., and my parents and Kevin had long gone to bed. I was about to pack up when I realized I needed a hard copy of a schema I'd been working on. I sent the file to their printer in the study, a room I rarely entered. As I walked in to retrieve the page, I saw that the printer tray wasn't empty. Someone had forgotten to collect their last print job. It was a stack of about 10 pages, face down. Annoyed at the waste of paper, I picked them up to put them in the recycling bin. But the top page, which was now the bottom of the stack, caught my eye. It was a letterhead I didn't recognize. Bold, corporate, and sterile. Viridian Properties. My blood ran cold. Viridian was the massive, notoriously aggressive real estate development firm that had been buying up half the historic properties in our county and replacing them with soulless, glass and steel, mixed-use developments. They were the very monster my parents claimed they were fighting. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. It wasn't just a letter. It was a preliminary sales agreement. A multi-million-dollar offer from Viridian to purchase the lot where the reading nook stood. And my parents had already signed the letter of intent. I sank into my dad's creaky office chair, the document shaking in my hands. The words blurred together, but certain phrases jumped out in horrifying clarity. Contingent on the successful launch of a fully functional e-commerce platform. Significant increase in valuation based on demonstrated digital outreach and sales potential. Final appraisal to be conducted following the official website launch on the 15th. It all clicked into place. The urgency, the sudden interest in a website after decades of technophobia. The way they placated Kevin's every ridiculous demand because they weren't building a tool to save their business. They were building a feature to inflate its price. They were dressing up the lamb for slaughter. My work, my computer magic, my love for this store. It was all just another asset to be leveraged, another line item on a sales agreement. They hadn't just lied to me. They had weaponized my love against itself. They had turned my genuine desire to help into the cornerstone of their secret, lucrative exit strategy. The pot roast, the tea, the "You're a lifesaver, honey." It was all a performance. A 3-month-long play designed to get me to build the most valuable part of their sales pitch for free. The grief was instant and suffocating, but it was quickly followed by a cold, clarifying anger. They thought I was just the quiet, reliable workhorse, the dutiful daughter who would do anything for her family. They were about to find out that the person who builds the house also knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are and exactly how to take them down. I didn't storm out of the study and confront them. I didn't scream or cry. Something inside me had gone perfectly still. I carefully placed the Viridian paperwork back in the printer tray, exactly as I'd found it, and went back to the kitchen table. For a moment, I stared at my laptop screen, at the beautiful, intricate world I had built for them. The homepage glowed with a warm, inviting light. The virtual tour was seamless. The checkout process was elegant and intuitive. It was, without a doubt, the best work I had ever done. And it was all a lie. A beautiful coffin for a thing I loved. My first instinct was to delete everything, to wipe the server clean and leave them with nothing but the digital ashes of their deception. But that felt too simple, too reactionary. It wasn't enough. They didn't deserve a quick explosion. They deserved a perfectly executed implosion. They deserved to walk into that meeting with Viridian Properties, chests puffed out, ready to cash in on my labor, only to find that the very thing they were selling had vanished into thin air. So I kept working. For the next 2 weeks, I was the model daughter, the perfect developer. I implemented Kevin's stupid flashing icons. I changed the font on the homepage to a generic, corporate-friendly sans serif he liked. I listened to my father's nervous prattling about the big launch and my mother's saccharine praise. I played my part in their play, all while building a secret backstage. Late at night, in the privacy of my own apartment, I wrote a small, elegant piece of code. A kill switch. It was tied to a specific time, 10:00 a.m. on the 15th, the exact moment their presentation to the Viridian board was scheduled to begin. At that time, the script would execute a single, irreversible command. It wouldn't delete the site. That would be too crude. Instead, it would sever the connection between the domain name and the server that hosted all the files. To anyone trying to access it, the site wouldn't look deleted. It would look like it never existed in the first place. The URL would lead to a dead end, a 404 error, page not found. To complete the effect, I designed a custom 404 page. It was simple, just white text on a black background. It didn't have the store's logo. It just had a single line of text in the center, in the very Olivetti typewriter font I had so lovingly created in the beginning. It read, "Some stories are not for sale." The day before the launch, I did one final review with them. Kevin was strutting around the kitchen like a conquering hero. "See, Chloe, I told you that blue would make it pop," he said, pointing at the screen. "It looks 1,000,000 times better. Professional." My dad clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes gleaming with a greedy light I now understood all too well. "You did good, kiddo. You really came through for us." My mom gave me a hug, her perfume cloying and suffocating. "We're so proud of you. After tomorrow, all our worries will be over." I just smiled, a tight, brittle smile. "I'm glad I could help," I said. "You have no idea. When that night I uploaded the final piece of code, set the timer, and closed my laptop. I had built them the most beautiful, functional, and valuable Trojan horse they could ever imagine. And tomorrow morning, they were going to wheel it right into the boardroom themselves. This wasn't just about a website. It was about a lifetime of this. This dynamic was the bedrock of our family. I was the foundation, solid, reliable, and completely invisible. Kevin was the fancy decorative facade, getting all the attention and admiration. This betrayal wasn't an anomaly. It was the culmination of 30 years of practice. I remembered my 16th birthday. Kevin, who was 18, had gotten a brand new convertible 2 years earlier for his. My parents threw him a massive party. For my 16th, they gave me a $100 savings bond and told me it was important to learn the value of deferred gratification. When I graduated from college, summa cum laude, with a degree in computer science, I got a congratulatory phone call and a check in the mail for $200. When Kevin got a minor promotion from junior sales associate to sales associate, they threw a catered dinner party and my dad gave a tearful speech about how proud he was to see his son climbing the corporate ladder. My whole life I was the fixer. When their air conditioning broke in the middle of a heat wave, I was the one who spent a weekend in their sweltering attic with a headlamp and YouTube tutorials, figuring out how to replace the capacitor because they couldn't afford a repairman right now. A month later, I saw my mother's vacation photos from a weekend spa trip with her friends on social media. When my dad co-signed a loan for Kevin's disastrous startup selling imported hoverboards, and Kevin defaulted, I was the one who drained my savings to pay the bank so it wouldn't ruin my dad's credit. I never got that money back. Kevin never even said thank you. He just complained that the business would have worked if he'd had more seed capital. Each time I'd swallow my resentment. I tell myself that this is just what families do. You show up. You help. You don't keep score. But they were keeping score. They were just writing all of my contributions in invisible ink. They saw my competence not as a gift to be cherished, but as a resource to be endlessly exploited. My willingness to help wasn't seen as love. It was seen as a given. My silence wasn't seen as patience. It was seen as permission. The bookstore website wasn't a one-time con. It was just the most ambitious, most brazen exploitation in a long and storied history. Taking down the site wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. It was the only way to make them see me, to make them finally understand that the foundation they'd been standing on wasn't infinitely stable. And if you put enough weight on it, it would crumble. The morning of the 15th, I woke up before dawn. I didn't feel anxious or guilty. I felt serene. I made myself coffee, sat on my balcony, and waited. At exactly 10:01 a.m., my phone began to vibrate. A furious, insistent buzzing against the glass table. It was Kevin. I let it go to voicemail. Then a text from him. "Pick up the phone!" Then another. "What is wrong with you? Are you doing this on purpose?" A minute later, a call from my dad. I ignored it. Then a text from my mom. "Chloe, I don't know what's happening, but you need to call your father immediately. This is a nightmare." I let their panic build. I imagined the scene, the polished boardroom at Viridian Properties, the sleek suits, the expectant faces. My dad at the podium, clearing his throat. My brother by his side with the laptop. And then, nothing. A blank screen. The dead-end URL. The creeping, dawning horror as they realized their multi-million-dollar payday was evaporating before their very eyes. Finally, after about 15 minutes of letting them stew in the mess of their own making, I answered a call from Kevin. His voice, when it came, wasn't just frantic. It was venomous. "The site is gone. What did you do?" And that's when I told him. "I know, Kevin. I'm the one who took it down." The silence that followed was heavy with shock and disbelief. I could almost hear the gears in his head grinding, trying to process a reality where I wasn't the compliant, problem-solving machine he thought I was. Then the rage hit. "You! What? Are you insane?" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "You just cost us millions of dollars. Millions. Dad is having a panic attack. Viridian's lawyers are here. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking about the sales agreement I found on Dad's printer," I said, my voice still quiet. "The one with Viridian Properties. The one that was contingent on the fully functional e-commerce platform I just spent 3 months of my life building for free." The line went quiet again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of being caught. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered. But the lie was flimsy and weak. "Save it, Kevin," I said, a weariness seeping into my voice. "You weren't saving the bookstore. You were flipping it. You were using me to jack up the price. You lied to me. You lied to the whole town." He abandoned the denial and pivoted to blame. "So what? It was a good business deal. It was going to set Mom and Dad up for life, and you blew it all up because of your petty, jealous little feelings. You couldn't stand to see me succeed, to see us finally get ahead." That was the moment I hung up. I didn't need to hear anymore. His words confirmed everything. It was never about the store. It was never about legacy. It was just about the money. I blocked his number, then my dad's, then my mom's. I turned my phone off, poured myself another cup of coffee, and watched the city wake up below me, feeling, for the first time in a very long time, completely and utterly free. The digital silence didn't last long. By the afternoon, they had found other ways to reach me. My email inbox became a war zone. My dad sent a long, rambling screed typed in all caps, accusing me of malicious sabotage and familial treason. He threatened legal action, claiming I had breached a verbal contract and that he would sue me for the full amount of the lost Viridian deal. He called me an ungrateful, spiteful child who had spat on her grandfather's memory. My mother's emails were different, but no less manipulative. They were filled with wounded, passive-aggressive sorrow. How could you do this to us, Chloe? After everything we've done for you, your father's health is fragile. The stress of this could kill him. Is that what you want? She attached photos of the bookstore, close-ups of dusty corners and worn book spines, as if trying to guilt-trip me with the very nostalgia she had been so willing to sell off. Then, the fallout began to ripple outward. My parents, humiliated and furious, went on the offensive, launching a smear campaign against me in our small town. The narrative they spun was a masterpiece of victimhood. They told everyone that I, their unstable and jealous daughter, had offered to build the website as a gesture of goodwill. But when I realized how successful it was going to be, I got greedy. I demanded a huge cut of the profits. When they refused, I flew into a rage and sabotaged the entire project out of spite, destroying the one chance they had to save the family business. They painted me as a digital Icarus who had flown too close to the sun of their modest success, and then tried to burn the whole world down when she didn't get her way. My phone started lighting up with messages from family friends and distant relatives. Heard what happened. So sorry you're going through this. One text read, clearly directed at my parents. Your daughter needs help, an old neighbor wrote to my mom on Facebook. A comment my aunt dutifully screenshotted and sent to me before I blocked her. The town, which had once felt like an extension of my home, now felt like enemy territory. I couldn't go to the local grocery store without feeling the weight of judging eyes, hearing the whispers from the next aisle over. Mrs. Gable, the sweet old librarian who had taught me the Dewey Decimal System, gave me a sad, disappointed look when I saw her at the post office. The story was sticking. They were charismatic, long-standing members of the community. I was the strange, quiet daughter who worked with computers and had always been a bit sensitive. It was an easy narrative to sell. The support I did get was quiet, almost clandestine. A text from a cousin. Hey, I don't know the whole story, but knowing Uncle Mark and Aunt Carol, I'm on your side. Call me if you need anything. A direct message on Instagram from an old high school friend. Don't let them get to you, Chloe. We all know Kevin's full of it. These small messages were life rafts in a sea of condemnation, but they were few and far between. The tide of public opinion was firmly on their side. They were the victims. I was the villain. I started to question myself. Had I gone too far? Was Kevin right? Was it just a business deal? My best friend Sarah set me straight. I had driven to her place in a daze, my parents' emails still burning in my mind. I told her everything, my voice flat and emotionless, as I recounted the story. When I finished, she just stared at me for a long moment. So, let me get this straight, she said, her voice dangerously calm. They lied to you for 3 months. They exploited your love for that store and your professional skills to the tune of about 50 grand. They planned to sell a beloved community institution to a soulless corporate developer and lie to everyone about it. And when you called them on it, they tried to destroy your reputation, and you're asking if you went too far? She shook her head. Chloe, you didn't start this fire. You just refused to keep letting them use you as kindling. Her words cut through the fog of guilt and self-doubt. She was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a calculated act of deception, followed by a vicious campaign of retaliation. My action wasn't the first shot in a war. It was a defensive maneuver in a war they had been silently waging against my autonomy for years. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide or apologize, and I certainly wasn't going to be their scapegoat. I logged into the server where the website files were still stored. Dormant, but intact. I downloaded every email exchange, every text message from Kevin with his creative direction, every file with a timestamp proving my work. Then I wrote a simple, one-page statement. It wasn't emotional or angry. It was factual. It laid out the timeline. Their initial plea to save the store, my agreement to work for free, and the discovery of the Viridian sales agreement. I attached a redacted copy of the agreement as proof. And then, I did something I had never done before. I posted it on my own Facebook page, making it public. I tagged my parents and my brother. The last line read, I didn't sabotage a family business. I refused to be an accomplice in selling its soul. The website I built to preserve a legacy can't be used to destroy it. Some stories are not for sale. Then I turned my phone off again. I had fired my only shot. Now I just had to wait and see where it landed. The fallout from my post was immediate and explosive. It was like dropping a lit match into a fireworks factory. Within an hour, my quiet, rarely used Facebook page became the epicenter of a small-town earthquake. The post was shared dozens, then hundreds of times. The redacted Viridian contract was the smoking gun nobody could ignore. The narrative my parents had so carefully constructed began to crumble. People who had sent them messages of sympathy were now posting comments on my wall. Wow. Just wow. I can't believe this. Mark and Carol, you have some explaining to do. The town's central Facebook group, usually a sleepy feed of lost pets and bake sale announcements, lit up with debate. People started connecting the dots. They remembered Viridian's predatory tactics in neighboring towns. They remembered my parents complaining about money for years, yet suddenly planning to save their business with a high-tech website. The story wasn't so simple anymore. My dad tried to do damage control. He posted a rambling defensive reply claiming the Viridian deal was just an exploratory option they were forced to consider, and that I had taken everything out of context. He accused me of violating their privacy and trying to ruin them. But the damage was done. His denial was weak against the hard evidence of the contract. Kevin made things worse. He jumped into the comments calling me a liar and a bitter, failed artist. He got into ugly public fights with people defending me, his charming facade cracking to reveal the snarling entitlement underneath. With every desperate, angry comment, he proved my point more effectively than I ever could have. The tide was turning. Mrs. Gable, the librarian, posted a simple comment that cut through all the noise. I've known Chloe since she was a little girl. She is honest to a fault. I believe her. That single endorsement from a respected community elder was worth more than 1,000 angry denials from my father. My mother resorted to a different tactic. She started calling relatives, crying, telling them I had aired our family's dirty laundry in public and that I was trying to tear the family apart. She was trying to reframe the conflict, to make it about my violation of some unspoken family code of silence rather than their initial deception. For some, it worked. My most conservative aunt called to lecture me about loyalty and forgiveness, telling me I should have handled this privately. I told her that my parents had chosen the public arena first with their smear campaign, and I was simply correcting the record. She hung up on me. But for others, my mother's tactics backfired. My uncle, my dad's younger brother, who had always been the quiet, observant one at family gatherings, called me. "I just want you to know," he said, his voice heavy. "I'm not surprised. I've seen them pull this kind of stuff for years. You were just the first one brave enough to set off the alarm." And the family was fracturing, splitting into factions. Those who valued loyalty and appearances above all else sided with my parents. Those who valued truth sided with me. The vast, uncomfortable middle just went silent, hoping the storm would pass. But the storm wasn't passing. It was making landfall. A reporter from the local newspaper, the Havenwood Gazette, called me for a comment. The story of the beloved local bookstore, the corporate developer, and the family drama was too juicy to ignore. I politely declined to comment further, simply stating that my post spoke for itself. The reporter then called my dad, who, in a fit of hubris, gave him an earful, ranting about his ungrateful daughter and the injustice of it all. The resulting article was a masterclass in damning with faint praise. It quoted my dad's angry tirade verbatim, juxtaposed it with the calm, factual text from my Facebook post, and included a no comment from Viridian Properties, which was the most damning statement of all. My parents had wanted to control the narrative. Now, it had spun completely out of their control, and they were at the center of a story that made them look greedy, deceptive, and foolish. They had been so focused on the multi-million-dollar prize that they never stopped to consider the cost of getting caught. In the quiet aftermath of the social media explosion, I found myself in a strange, new territory. The anger had receded, leaving behind a hollow sort of grief. I hadn't just exposed a lie. I had detonated my entire family structure. The home I grew up in was now a crater. The relationships I had once considered foundational were now rubble. There was a part of me that mourned the loss, not of the family I actually had, but of the family I had always pretended we were. The illusion of the loving, supportive unit was gone, and the reality was stark and ugly. I spent a lot of time with Sarah, talking for hours, or just sitting in comfortable silence. "You know," she said one evening as we watched a movie, "the bravest thing you did wasn't taking down the website. It was telling the truth afterward. They're used to people letting them get away with things in the name of keeping the peace. You refused to be peaceful. My life became a process of drawing new boundaries. I blocked the relatives who had lectured me. I muted the family group chats that were still simmering with passive-aggressive memes from Kevin. I started therapy, finally unpacking the decades of quiet conditioning that had taught me to equate my value with my usefulness. My therapist gave me a powerful piece of advice. You can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. It became my mantra. I had been the family's human bonfire for 30 years, and I was finally out of fuel. 1 month after, the incident, as it came to be known, a certified letter arrived. It was from a law firm, on behalf of my parents. It wasn't a lawsuit. Not yet. It was a cease and desist letter, demanding I remove my defamatory Facebook post. And it came with an invoice. They had itemized their damages. It included the estimated loss of the Viridian deal, a figure they'd pulled from thin air. It included a bill for my services, which they were now framing as a failed contract. And in a final act of spectacular pettiness, it included an item for 2,500 as emotional distress. I laughed. I actually sat at my kitchen table and laughed until tears streamed down my face. It was so absurd, so perfectly them. Even now, faced with the public wreckage of their own making, their only response was to double down, to try and bill me for the consequences of their own actions. I didn't take the post down. I took the letter, the invoice, and all the emails and screenshots, and I gave them to a lawyer of my own. Not because I wanted to fight them, but because I was done fighting alone. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Davies, reviewed everything and gave me a grim smile. "They don't have a case, Chloe," she said. "In fact, given that you worked for hundreds of hours under false pretenses, you probably have a case against them for fraudulent inducement and unjust enrichment. But," she added, looking me in the eye, "I get the feeling you don't want their money. You just want them to go away." I nodded. That was it. I didn't want revenge or justice or even an apology anymore. I just wanted peace. I wanted them to go away. We drafted a simple, firm response to their lawyer, stating that the post was factually accurate and would not be removed, and that any further attempts at contact would be considered harassment. We sent it off, and then, for the first time in months, there was silence. A deep, profound, and beautiful silence. The silence lasted for almost 6 months. The town's gossip moved on to other things. The for sale sign that went up in front of the reading nook gathered dust. I heard through the grapevine that Viridian had pulled its offer entirely after the bad press, and that my parents eventually sold the property to a different, less prestigious developer for a fraction of the original price. They got their money, but they lost their reputation. They moved to a retirement community in a different state, and I felt a sense of profound relief, the way you feel when a long, chronic fever finally breaks. I poured myself into my work, got a promotion, and started a small freelance business on the side, helping local nonprofits and artists build websites they could actually afford. I was using my skills on my own terms, for people who were genuinely grateful. It was healing. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, an unfamiliar number called my phone. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. It was my brother, Kevin. His voice was completely different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a strained, hesitant tone. "Chloe, it's me." I didn't say anything. "Look," he started, stumbling over his words. I know it's been a while. Things got out of hand." He paused. "Mom's not doing well. She's been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. The move, the stress, it's made things worse, fast. She asks for you. She doesn't remember the fight most days. She just remembers her daughter isn't there." My blood turned to ice. This was the nuclear option of guilt trips. the one I had subconsciously been dreading my entire life. He continued, his voice thick with a performance of emotion. Dad is trying his best, but he's overwhelmed. They need you, Chloe. Can you just call her? For her sake. Just let her hear your voice. For a split second, the old programming kicked in. The urge to fix, to soothe, to put my own pain aside for their comfort. I pictured my mother, frail and confused, and a wave of guilt washed over me. But then, I remembered the cold calculation in her emails. I remembered the invoice for emotional distress. I remembered the lifetime of manipulation that had led us to this point. Was this even real? Or was it just the most monstrous lie they had ever told? I'm sorry to hear that, Kevin, I said, my voice measured and cool, the voice of a polite stranger. I hope she gets the care she needs. You should look into memory care facilities in their area. I hear they have excellent staff. He was flabbergasted. What? That's it? Memory care facilities? This is your mother we're talking about. Yes, I said, and she and Dad have the money from the sale to afford the best possible care. I'm glad I was able to help them get it. I heard his sharp intake of breath, the sound of my final, perfectly aimed shot hitting its mark. You have to be the coldest person I've ever met, he whispered. No, Kevin, I said, and a real genuine smile touched my lips. I'm not cold. I'm just finished. Goodbye. I hung up the phone and blocked his new number. I didn't know if he was lying about my mother's health. I might never know, and I realized, with a startling clarity, that it didn't matter. Whether it was true or not, their pattern was the same. Using pain, real or manufactured, as a lever to pull me back into their orbit. I had finally learned that the only winning move was not to play. I looked out my window at the life I was building for myself, a life built on truth and mutual respect. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had made the right choice. My story with them was over. It was time to start writing my own. What's a family? Is it blood? Is it a shared history? Or is it a choice you make every day? A choice to show up with respect, with honesty, with a love that isn't conditional on what you can provide. For years, I thought it was the first two. I thought my obligation was written in my DNA. Now I know it's the third. And I know that you have the right to stop choosing people who refuse to choose you back. Walking away from my family wasn't a single act. It was 1,000 tiny ones. It was deleting their numbers. It was archiving the photos. It was learning to sit with the silence and not mistake it for emptiness. It was realizing that the peace I felt in their absence was more real and more nourishing than the love I had ever felt in their presence. Sometimes, building a healthy life means demolishing the one you were given. It's painful, and it's messy, and people will call you destructive for it. They won't see that you're not tearing down a home. You're escaping a prison. Let them talk. Your freedom is not up for their debate. If your story sounds anything like mine, if you are the designated fixer, the silent provider, the one who is expected to give endlessly from a well that no one ever replenishes, I want you to hear this. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. Your peace is worth more than their comfort. Your future is worth more than their version of your past. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but I feel like it's a story that a lot of us live in secret. The dutiful daughter, or the responsible son, who is slowly being erased by the needs and demands of their family. If you've ever been in a similar situation, if you've ever had to draw a line in the sand, I would be honored if you'd share your experience in the comments below. How did you do it? What did you learn? Your story might be the one that gives someone else the courage they need to find their own peace. Please like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Let's create a community where we celebrate, not just family, but healthy family. And until next time, be kind to yourselves. You deserve it.